The last thing Ethan Carter noticed was how ordinary the streetlights looked in his windshield, steady pools of amber, like nothing in the world could possibly go wrong. Ethan's life wasn't perfect, but it was solid. He worked full-time, showed up for Sunday dinners, and still let his mom fuss over whether he was eating enough. His younger sister teased him about being boring, the kind of boring that meant safe. Predictable. The kind of boring families quietly pray for. Then came Mia. They'd dated long enough for habits to form, shared playlists, inside jokes, a favorite late-night diner where the coffee tasted like burned comfort. When it ended, it didn't end cleanly. There was the pregnancy, for one. The reality of it sat between them like a third person in every conversation, heavy and unavoidable. And then there was money. It started small, bills split unevenly, alone, until next week, that became next month, arguments that didn't sound like arguments at first, just tired voices, careful words, and silence afterward. Ethan wanted to do the right thing. He also wanted to stop feeling like every message from Mia came with a hidden hook. Mia told friends she was trying to keep things civil, for the baby. Ethan believed her, mostly. He wanted to believe her. His family did too, at least at first. Ethan's father would nod slowly and say, "Be respectful, but be smart." His mother would tighten her mouth and ask, "Are you sure you should be meeting her alone?" Ethan always answered the same way, "It's fine. We're just talking." What Ethan didn't fully understand, what he couldn't see from his side of the screen, was that Mia's life had already shifted into something darker and tighter. She'd started seeing Logan Pierce, a man who didn't simply dislike Ethan's continued presence, he felt threatened by it. Logan wasn't the type to let jealousy simmer quietly. His anger came out in questions that sounded casual but weren't. "Why is he still texting you? Why do you answer? Do you miss him?" Mia tried to manage Logan the way people manage storms, by predicting them, sidestepping them, offering small concessions to keep the air calm. But storms don't negotiate. They gather strength. Logan had a friend, Derek Shaw, broad-shouldered, sharp-smiled, always ready to turn irritation into action. Derek treated conflict like entertainment. The kind of man who laughed too loudly, too often, as if daring anyone to challenge him. Over time, the idea formed between them, not in one sudden decision, but in a series of conversations that pushed the boundary a little farther each time. A plan built out of resentment, bravado, and the dangerous confidence of two men who thought consequences were for other people. Late one night, Ethan's phone lit up. "Mia, can we talk? In person. Just us. I need this to be calm. Mia, please. I can't do this over text anymore." Ethan stared at the message while his apartment hummed with quiet, the faint rattle of a vent, the distant hush of tires on wet pavement. He could have ignored it. He could have told her to call in the morning. He could have listened to that small, cautious voice in his head, the one that sounded like his mother. Instead, he typed back, "Okay. Where?" Mia replied with an address on the edge of town, the kind of place people drove past without noticing. She added a final line that tugged at Ethan's sense of responsibility. "We need to settle things before the baby comes." Ethan grabbed his keys. As he walked out, he didn't see the way the night seemed to hold its breath, how the air felt too still, how the clouds pressed low and featureless, like a lid. He only thought about doing what he'd always tried to do, show up, be decent, fix what could be fixed. The car door shut with a soft, final sound. And somewhere else, two men waited, already convinced this night belonged to them. Ethan drove with one hand on the wheel, the other resting loosely near his phone, replaying old conversations in his head. He told himself this meeting would be like the others, awkward but manageable. A short conversation. Clear boundaries. Then home. The address Mia sent led him away from familiar streets. The houses thinned out, replaced by warehouses and closed storefronts that looked abandoned even during the day. At night, they felt hollow. Streetlights flickered, some completely dark, leaving stretches of road swallowed by shadow. Ethan slowed as he approached the location. He checked the number twice. It wasn't a home. Just a wide pull-off near an unused service road. That should have been his sign to turn around. But Mia's next message arrived almost instantly, as if she'd been watching. "I'm here. Just park and we'll talk." Ethan exhaled. 5 minutes, he told himself. Then I'm gone. He pulled over and cut the engine. The silence that followed felt heavy, pressing in on his ears. He scanned the area, expecting to see Mia's car, her familiar silhouette stepping out. Instead, there was nothing. No movement. No headlights. He reached for his phone. That was when shadows shifted near the far edge of the lot. Before Ethan could fully process what he was seeing, his driver's door was yanked open. Hands grabbed him, rough, urgent, overwhelming. Voices barked orders, sharp and excited, overlapping in a blur he couldn't separate. "Get out. Now." Ethan shouted Mia's name, confusion crashing into panic. He struggled, instinctively pushing back, but he was outmatched. Logan Pierce was right there, his face tight with rage, eyes locked onto Ethan with a focus that felt rehearsed. Behind him was Derek Shaw, grinning like this was exactly where he wanted to be. "Should have stopped texting her," Derek muttered, almost casually. Ethan tried to reason with them. He said Mia was pregnant. He said they were just talking. He said he didn't want trouble. His words seemed to slide right past them, never landing. The night erupted into chaos. Ethan was struck, dragged away from his car, his feet scraping helplessly against the pavement. Every attempt to pull free only tightened their grip. The sounds around him blurred, breathing, shuffling, a sharp laugh that didn't belong in any situation like this. Somewhere nearby, a car door opened. Mia stood a short distance away, frozen. Her hands were clenched tight against her coat. Her face was pale, unreadable. Ethan locked eyes with her for just a second, a silent plea, a question she didn't answer. Then he was forced into another vehicle. As they drove, Ethan tried to keep track of where they were going, but fear scrambled his sense of direction. Turns came too quickly. Time stretched, then collapsed. The road grew rougher, the hum of tires changing as pavement gave way to gravel. Logan didn't speak much. His jaw stayed clenched, his knuckles white. Derek filled the silence with mocking remarks, treating Ethan's fear like fuel. "This didn't have to happen," Derek said. "You made it happen." Ethan's thoughts raced, not toward escape, but toward his family. His mother waiting up for a text. His father assuming his son was handling things like an adult. His sister, who would tease him tomorrow if he was late for dinner. None of them knew where he was. None of them knew how wrong everything had gone. The car finally stopped in a remote, unlit area far from the city's glow. The air smelled of damp earth and cold metal. When the doors opened, the night swallowed them whole. Ethan was pulled out, stumbling, heart pounding so hard it felt like it might drown out the world itself. Whatever this meeting had been meant to be, it was over. Something far worse had taken its place. The place they dragged Ethan to felt cut off from the rest of the world, as if it had been deliberately forgotten. No street lights. No passing cars. Just open ground, rough and uneven, with the faint outline of trees pressing in from the edges. The cold settled quickly, seeping through his clothes, sharpening every breath. Ethan stumbled as they forced him forward. He tried to pull free again, desperation lending him strength he didn't know he had, but it wasn't enough. Logan's grip was relentless, fueled by something deeper than anger. Derek hovered close, eager, restless, like he was waiting for permission to unleash everything he'd been holding back. "You think you can just stay in her life?" Logan snapped, his voice low and shaking. "Like I don't exist?" Ethan shook his head, words tumbling out too fast. He said it wasn't like that. He said he just wanted things settled. He said he never meant to cause problems. Each sentence sounded smaller than the last, swallowed by the night. What followed wasn't a single moment, it was a stretch of time that blurred together, measured only by pain and effort. Ethan tried to shield himself, raising his arms, twisting away, reacting on instinct alone. His body bore the marks of every attempt to survive, every refusal to simply give in. The ground beneath him was cold and unforgiving. The air rang with harsh breathing, sudden movements, sharp commands. More than once, Ethan thought it might stop, that someone would realize how far this had gone. It didn't. Mia was there too, close enough to hear everything. At times she turned away. At times she watched, frozen between fear and the terrible understanding that there was no undoing what had been set in motion. She told herself it had gone too far, but not soon enough to stop it. Ethan's thoughts fractured. He focused on small things to stay present, the sound of wind through branches, the smell of damp earth, the memory of his father's laugh. He tried to imagine warmth. Home. Morning light. Eventually, his strength failed him. The night grew quiet in a way that felt wrong, unnatural. Logan stood back, chest heaving, staring at Ethan as if seeing him clearly for the first time. Derek's excitement drained into something closer to unease. Panic crept in then, not the frantic kind, but the heavy realization that nothing could be taken back. They worked quickly after that, driven by fear of consequences rather than reason. Ethan was moved again, his car repositioned with shaking hands. Flames flickered against the dark, harsh and unnatural, eating away at the evidence they hoped would disappear with the smoke. But fires don't erase everything. They left before dawn, the sky just beginning to lighten at the edges, each of them carrying the weight of what they'd done in silence. No one spoke on the drive back. There was nothing left to say. Hours later, daylight revealed what the darkness had hidden. Workers passing through the area noticed the remains of a vehicle, blackened and still faintly warm. They stopped. They stared. Then they made the call that would change everything. By midday, the site was sealed off. Investigators moved carefully, documenting every detail. What they found told a story far more complete than the attackers had ever imagined. And for Ethan's family, the worst day of their lives was just beginning. Morning light stripped away the illusion of emptiness. What had looked like just another forgotten stretch of land now crawled with activity. Emergency vehicles lined the road. Red and blue lights pulsed silently against the pale sky. Investigators moved with slow precision, stepping carefully around the remains of the burned vehicle, marking the ground, photographing everything before a single piece of evidence was disturbed. The fire had done damage, but not enough. The vehicle told its own story. Burn patterns showed where the flames had started and how quickly they spread. The position of the remains revealed that what had happened here was not an accident, not a spontaneous blaze in the night. This scene had been arranged. When word reached Ethan Carter's family, it landed like a physical blow. His mother collapsed into a chair, repeating his name as if saying it enough times might undo what she was being told. His father stood rigid, jaw clenched, asking questions in a voice too calm for the moment. His sister didn't speak at all. She just stared at the wall, replaying the last message Ethan had sent her, an ordinary joke, now frozen in time. Investigators moved quickly. Ethan's phone records showed a trail that led straight to Mia Harper. Messages arranging a late-night meeting. Location data placing her nearby at the exact time everything unfolded. Surveillance cameras along the route captured vehicles matching descriptions, arriving, leaving, returning. Witnesses came forward too. A security guard recalled seeing unfamiliar cars parked where they didn't belong. A delivery driver remembered headlights cutting across the road long after businesses had closed. And then there was the science. Traces recovered from the scene connected more than one person to what had happened. The story those findings told was brutal and unmistakable. Ethan had fought. He had resisted with everything he had, leaving behind proof of his determination to live. As pressure mounted, the cracks began to show. Logan Pierce was the first to unravel. He tried to explain things away, insisting emotions had gotten out of hand, that no one meant for it to go that far. Derek Shaw followed with a version that shifted blame everywhere except himself. Mia's interview was quieter. She cried. She said she never imagined it would end like this. She admitted she'd sent the messages, arranged the meeting, convinced herself it was only meant to be a conversation, a confrontation, maybe, but nothing more. Investigators had heard those explanations before. By the end of the week, all three were in custody. News spread quickly. Headlines spoke of jealousy, betrayal, and a young man whose life had been cut short over resentment that had been allowed to grow unchecked. Strangers left flowers near the site. Messages poured in from people who had never met Ethan but felt they knew him through the photos his family shared, his easy smile, his ordinary happiness. The case moved forward with relentless momentum. For Ethan's family, there was no relief in knowing answers were coming. Each new detail was another wound, another reminder of how his final hours had unfolded. And as the courtroom doors prepared to open, one truth became impossible to ignore. This wasn't just about anger. It was about choices. The courtroom was silent in a way that felt deliberate, as if even the air understood the weight of what was about to happen. Ethan Carter's family sat together, hands clasped, shoulders tight. They had learned the rhythm of court by then, the waiting, the formal language, the way time seemed to slow whenever his name was spoken aloud. Photos of Ethan had been entered into evidence earlier, smiling, relaxed, unmistakably alive. Seeing them displayed under harsh lights felt unbearable. The prosecution laid out the case piece by piece. Messages were read aloud. The late-night meeting request. The reassurances. The final unanswered text. Digital data placed each defendant exactly where they claimed not to be. Surveillance footage showed vehicles moving in careful sequence. Experts explained findings calmly, professionally, as if describing something ordinary instead of the last hours of a young man's life. Witnesses spoke next. Some voices trembled. Others were flat, exhausted. Each account added another layer, another confirmation that this had not been spontaneous. It had been planned. Set in motion. Allowed to continue long past any point of return. When it was time for the defendants to speak, the room leaned forward almost imperceptibly. Logan Pierce expressed regret but stopped short of responsibility. He spoke of emotions, jealousy, losing control. Derek Shaw claimed he had followed someone else's lead, that things had escalated beyond what he expected. Mia Harper's statement was the hardest to hear. She cried openly, apologizing to Ethan's family, saying she never imagined such an outcome. She described fear, pressure, confusion, words that sounded small against the enormity of what had happened. The prosecution reminded the court that she had arranged the meeting, knowing the tension, knowing the risk. The jury deliberated for days. Those days stretched endlessly for Ethan's family. Every morning meant walking back into the same room, seeing the same faces, bracing for the same memories. When the jury finally returned, no one breathed. The verdicts were read one by one. Guilty. 2 convictions for murder. 1 conviction for a serious role in arranging the attack. The sentences that followed were severe, reflecting the calculated nature of the crime and the suffering it caused. The judge spoke about accountability, about choices made freely, about a life that could never be restored. Ethan's mother wept quietly. His father closed his eyes. His sister stared straight ahead, her hands clenched so tightly her knuckles had gone white. Justice, they were told, had been served. But justice did not bring Ethan back. It did not erase the nights replaying what-ifs, or the mornings when silence filled spaces where his voice should have been. It did not soften the knowledge that his kindness, his willingness to meet, to talk, to do the right thing, had been used against him. Appeals followed. Each one was denied. Years later, news of possible early release for one of those involved reopened wounds the family had fought hard to stitch closed. Public outrage flared. Ethan's name trended briefly, attached to debates and headlines, before fading again from the wider world. For his family, it never faded. They carried him forward in memories, in traditions, in the quiet determination to make sure he was more than just a case number, more than a cautionary tale. And as the final chapter approached, one question lingered heavier than all the rest. How does a life move forward when the past refuses to stay buried? Time did what it always does. It moved forward, indifferent to grief, carrying the world with it whether anyone was ready or not. For Ethan Carter's family, life divided itself into before and after. Before, there were last-minute dinner plans, borrowed jackets, unanswered calls that could be returned later. After, every missed call felt permanent. Every quiet room felt unfinished. They learned to speak his name without breaking, eventually. They learned which memories hurt the most and which ones could still make them smile. His father took longer routes home from work, avoiding places that reminded him too sharply of who should have been there. His mother kept Ethan's room exactly the same for years, as if he might walk back in and need everything just where he left it. His sister carried his presence forward in smaller ways, playing his favorite songs, telling his stories so others would know who he was beyond the headlines. The legal system closed its files. The case became archived, referenced only when appeals were denied or when one of the names resurfaced in the news. Each time it did, the wound reopened. The talk of early release, of time served being weighed against a life lost, felt like a second betrayal. Public attention flared and faded, as it always does. People debated, commented, argued. Then they moved on. Ethan's family could not. They attended memorial events quietly. They spoke to advocacy groups when they had the strength, emphasizing what had been taken and how easily it had happened. They warned about unresolved ties, about jealousy left to grow unchecked, about the danger of believing that a calm conversation is always safe. There was no neat ending. No moment where grief transformed into something lighter. Healing came in fragments, small victories measured in days when the weight felt manageable. In the end, what remained was not just loss, but meaning. Ethan had been kind. Responsible. Willing to show up. Those qualities had not been weaknesses, even if they were exploited. His family refused to let his story become one only about what was done to him. They spoke of who he was. And in quiet moments, when the world slowed and the noise fell away, one truth stood firm and undeniable. A single message can change a life. And the absence left behind can echo forever.